So first of all, I have two thank yous. Thank you all for coming. I'm so surprised in August on this hot day in the middle of it all. I'm so pleased that you all came. So thank you very much. Second of all, just so much thanks to Casey and to the team at Studios Inc. It's really been such a pleasure and such a surprise. I was a resident here in, I guess, 18 to 21. And at that time, at the end of my time, I had an exhibition that was in the exhibition hall, and it was called The Untangling, because it had been such a difficult time. You know, it was right after, it was installed in January of 2021, so it was right after January 6th, and it was during COVID, and it was a really tangled time. So Casey and I communicated in June, and there was sort of opportunity that arose to have this exhibition now, and it's really timely because things are still tangled, so it's called Still Tangled, but they're getting a little bit less tangled, so that's great. But anyway, so it's kind of come together quickly, and there's many pieces that were in this earlier exhibition, and then there are a few others that are different that you might not see. Okay, well, I'll start talking, and then we'll kind of walk around and look at the work, if that sounds good to you all. So many thanks, though, to Hannah and Terry, Aurora, and Casey, and Mallory, and everyone was so extremely helpful, so thank you. Okay, so first of all, we'll just take a look at this wall. I work a lot with thorns from the honey locust tree, and I have samples of these thorns, which are so amazing. I just think they're interesting. They grow on the side of the tree like this, and it's a protective mechanism so that animals won't eat the bark. And I harvest them with great help from my partner and husband, Turner. He's a good harvester also. And then I use this tiny little tool right here, which is a wood, I mean, this is my workbench, which is so hilarious. It's kind of like, these are burning tools. So I use this little pencil point tip of that tool to burn a hole in each one of the thorns in multiple places, and then I put them together. It's primarily tension that holds them together, but I use a little bit of wood glue. And then using, having those sections like that, let's see, okay, so here's what happens. When I first came to Studios Inc., one of the first pieces that I made was this piece, and it was called Rift. And it was the first and largest piece I'd ever made. And I'd never done a piece that had, and it was because of Studios Inc. that I had the opportunity, because there was the space, there was the possibility, it was amazing, which is one of the great benefits of being here. So this has an interior chain, which is this. It's, they're organically shaped steel links. And so those hook to the ceiling, and then these sections kind of interlock with them like that as they interlock with the chains, they also interlock with each other. So that's how I generally build those. And so that's basically the process with the thorns. When we walk around, you'll note, and I'll show you when we go there, there's a piece called the Hope Line, which is it's a long gold chain. And it's called a Hope Line because there's no interior chain. So we're hoping that it's still there. And it has been. It's been like 3 years. So it's and hope is fragile, you know. It's not, it's something you have to pay attention to. So, and that also was right at the time of January 21, which is an important thing. Okay, so these are the chains. These are the thorns. And then there also are these tiny little thorns, which are not necessarily, they can be on the same tree. It's not a case in which this is the small this is going to grow into this. That's not the deal. But on the tree, there will be thorns that are this size, and then there will be thorns that are this size. And I just think they're sort of elegant and anthropomorphic and interesting in that way. Okay, so now here's what we'll do. We'll talk a little bit about the flag, and then maybe we'll walk around and look at the pieces, because there are three kinds of works in here. There are the thornworks, there's the flag conversation, which I'll have now. And then there are these black works, which are two large pieces on the two large groups on the side. And those were part of this exhibition also. And they were really responsive to what a terrible time it was, how difficult it was, and just the darkness that was sort of enveloping all of us. So that's what these were starting out to be studies for the larger pieces. And in fact, they kind of turned into pieces of them in and of themselves. And then the third group that we'll look at are the pyrographs. And those are burn drawings, and they are they're works on paper. And these are the tools that I use for the pyrographs. So I'll show you how that goes when we go over there. But right now we'll talk about the flag. Okay, so this is the first flag that I did, and it was in 2012, and it was at Carrie Cabeza, which was a gallery that was in Kansas City. It was a two-person show with a woman named Jung Ah-woo, and she was Korean, and she had dual American and Korean citizenship. And the show was called I Am an American. And so it was an interesting show. But anyway, it had to do with I don't want to say Americana, but issues related to being an American. So that was the first flag I did. It was on the wall. And the thing to me that was the most interesting about that, it was sort of fragile and almost lace-like in the way it looked. And the thing that I found to be the most interesting, David Catapult is a professor at KU, and he had a couple of graduate students, and they came to the show, and we were talking later. And one of the graduate students said, oh, you know, this raises issues to me of the separation of church and state, or not. Because to that person, this thorn was related to religion and Christianity. And so it raised a level of conversation and context that I had not intended and was not part of my conversation. But I love that this person brought that to what they, you know, the way that they saw that work. So to me, that was one of the most interesting aspects of this piece. After that, in 2014, this was a piece that was at Haw, and it was kind of coming apart because it was during the time that, in my view, America was getting so contentious, and more so than it had been. This was like when Obama was elected. It was 2014, so he'd been in office. But there were issues related to the debt ceiling. There were issues related to Abu Ghraib. There was like all this stuff going on. So this was more fragmented. And then if you looked at these, I'll tell you, you won't notice this, but I will tell you, this is flag 1, this is flag 2. Flag 3 is not up here because it was installed at the Mid-America Arts Alliance, and it was a business venue. And so I don't have pictures. It was a temporary installation. So it's not, I don't visually have it as part of this conversation. This was in my studio. This is flag 4. This was in my studio at Studios Inc., and it was a complete flag. And it was such a great studio and gave me such great opportunity. This was the first time that I suspended the flag, so it was off the wall, and shadow added a huge dimension to it. And then this very flag went to Italy. This was in Como, Italy, and shadow also was a big part of this. And it was part of an international exhibition of artists from around the world. So that was an amazing opportunity. And then this was in 2021, and this is the one that was in my exhibition here. So this was the last one. And then I had hoped to do a flag for 2024 during the election. And this one is kind of falling on the ground, and it has holes and it's kind of rent. It's more torn and tortured than the other flags. And I had planned on doing one for 2024 right now that was more tortured, you know, that was more difficult and more fragmented. But things didn't come together, both personally and professionally. There were issues that it wasn't going to happen. So when I talked with Casey in June, it seemed the perfect opportunity to do a newer version of the flag. And maybe, if you don't mind walking around, maybe this is when we should sort of walk around, okay? So this flag, of course, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I mean, the way life is, one never really knows. But it seemed that this was just exactly what it needed to be. I installed it. This is about 85%, maybe 90% of the flags that I used. You know, the real flag. And when I installed this, Biden was still in the race, and it was such a fragile time. I mean, it's still a fragile time, but nonetheless, there felt like a degree of poignancy in that these were in not really limbo, but unresolved. We were so unresolved, and still are. And the photos at the other end of the room are from the piece in 2021. So that's a close-up of the piece, and then the boxes are the way, and the chains are the way it's de-installed. It shows the links, and it shows the boxes on the bottom. Anyway, so when I first installed this, Biden was still in the race. And so there was this kind of poignancy. You know, I felt like, I'm not sure what this means, but it feels like the right thing for it to be. And then now that things have changed somewhat, it feels like there's potential. So this kind of takes on a different meaning, depending on certainly your political point of view, but also kind of like the nation's tone of voice, kind of like what we're kind of thinking. So I'm really quite thrilled that this has wound up being flag 6, because it's sort of where we are and where I didn't know we were going to be, and there we are. So that's what this piece is about. So now what we'll do is you can look at any time, but these are the black pieces I was talking about that relate to the earlier work, and they were in the 2021 exhibition, and they were just sort of expressive of the angst and the concern that we all had, and the sort of energy that was related to that. And they are black acrylic and sumi ink and graphite. And interestingly enough, this is interesting to me. I'm not sure it's interesting to you all, but that the piece that was so important to me, the white one that is hanging, if you look at that closely, at that photograph, the ceiling has this beautiful kind of, it was in the other room, and it has this beautiful kind of rafters that are way up there, like 17 feet tall. And they're apparent in that photograph, and they're just, that was an important piece, and that form is. So that's what is part of what's in these pieces. They have burn lines, actually, not all of them, but these 3 particularly have this kind of scoring that comes from burning initially, and that the ceiling is present in those pieces in a certain way. Okay. And then this is the hope line. So this is the one that does not have any interior structure. I make sections, and then I make them in about 3-foot sections, and then they kind of interlock. So it's been around for 3 years, since 2021. Actually, before that, because I made it earlier in the studio. And it has been here, it has been in my studio at Wholesome, and it's been at the exhibition hall. So it's pretty robust hope. I think that's encouraging. Okay, and then now what we'll do is we'll talk about the pyrographs, but before we do, we'll talk about that little piece in the corner. So that is that's a piece that's a thorn piece, and it has the interior chain. And initially, I was going to call it cloud. So if you look on the image list, it says cloud. But then I realized, like yesterday, that I really wanted to call it hope again, because it's small, and it's like got the potential to grow, and the shadow sort of amplifies it. And I think we're feeling more hopeful. So if your thing says cloud, it really means hope. Okay. All right. So, yeah, right, exactly. So, hope cloud. I could do that, right? So now what we'll do is we'll talk about these pyrographs, and I think what I'll do is if you stay here, and I'm just going to get this little tool, and I'll get both of these tools and show you this. This is a work on paper, and what I do is I use, and And I hate to tell you, this is also called the Hope Line. But the reason is I had made this piece before I made this gold piece. And I had named it the Hope Line, and I didn't know what its life was. It was in my studio. And it happened one day that after I had made this piece, this was not framed, and I kind of moved over the foam core that it was on, and I recognized the relationship, and that it has kind of a strong relationship to this piece, which was not originally intended. But anyway, here's how this goes. The way I make this is I use this little tiny tip of this burning tool, and I have something very professional like a yellow measuring tape, you know, one of those, and I put it on the table and I put my arm like this, and I have it on foam core, and so I'm just doing this. And I make millions of tiny, tiny little marks. And the way I think of it is this way. You know how we all have all of this noise in our heads all the time? So it's like this constant chatter, right, of all these things that we want to think about or that we don't want to think about or that we're doing or all that stuff. And so it goes, na 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 na. And so this goes, na 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 na. But I think about distilling that sound. So it's like, na 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 na. So it gets to a meditative hum. And this is the result of the meditative hum. So that's how I think of that piece. Okay, now, yeah, we'll go to another. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Jerry. Okay, so now maybe we should talk, I guess we'll talk about these and then we'll talk about this, and that'll be the end of my comments, and you may have questions or comments. Thank you, Jerry. Okay, so this series of work, and you may want to come closer because they're very delicate, to say the least. Okay, so this body of work is called The Chant of the Prayer Flags, and it kind of has two contexts. The first context, I had a project at the Salina Art Center years ago, and I made millions of trips back and forth across the Flint Hills, which are so astoundingly beautiful. And so a lot of these marks relate to the changing skyscape and the fluctuating skyscape of the horizon line and the clouds going back and forth across the Flint Hills. So that's a lot of what this kind of mark making relates to. But the piece is called The Chant of the Prayer Flags. And the reason for that is, I think you all probably are familiar with the prayer flags in Tibet that are along the sides of the mountains. And every time the wind blows, it sends a message to the heavens that's written on the prayer flags. So I feel like I get really mushy, so pardon me. I feel like there are so many moments in life that are really extraordinary. And as an example, so these are kind of notes of acknowledgement for those moments. And as I have some visual aids here, for example. As an example, during that extremely difficult time that was so dark, I was driving home, I was on Main Street, and I had the radio on. And there was all this info about politics and all this info about COVID, and it was just such a difficult time. And I had the sunroof open, and I felt something kind of fluttering, and I looked down, and there was a praying mantis that had come through my sunroof and landed in my cup holder. And it was so moving to me. I turned the radio off, and I turned the corner, and I carefully got something, and I got the praying mantis out. But it was like just this astounding moment, and it was kind of like, that's what life is really about. You know, it's the praying mantis. It's that moment of just this extraordinary thing. And so that is in here. Also, we had a bird that flew into the window, in our kitchen that faces west. And it flew away, so it was okay. But it was like a dove. And it made this astounding dust stencil that was so beautiful. And it was under an eave. And so we were able to keep it for, I don't know, weeks, you know, as long as possible, a long time. But it was just this amazing dust stencil that was so beautiful. And additionally, okay. So I brought some flowers in from the garden, and I'm not the beautiful gardener that some of us are. I'm a haphazard gardener, and this was a few years ago. But I brought some flowers in from the garden, and I kept them in there on the kitchen thing. And I kept noticing that there were these little round pellets that would be on the counter. And I started looking, and I noticed that this caterpillar was eating the parsley and eating the other stuff, and that was little caterpillar poop on the thing. So I kept bringing more things in and watching him. So in my kitchen, he grew to this, and then he formed a chrysalis, and I've got too many photos here. Okay, he formed a chrysalis and was on a rose and stayed in there, and then the chrysalis turned brown, and he popped out of it, and then I just got this one photo, but it was a black swallowtail. And so it was so astounding that that happened in my kitchen on my, you know, flowers. It was amazing. And so that information is in here. Well, it was a few weeks. It was a couple of weeks, several weeks, yeah. And then this is my last one. And then we have owls, and I'm inside the bedroom, and the owl can't see me. And so I'm able to get this photograph of the owl right outside the bedroom window. And so these are all like moments of appreciation that are part of my chant of the prayer flags. Okay. That's it. Oh no, there's one more. I forgot that one. Yeah, sorry, one more. Okay, hold your applause. Now, let me think. Terry, does Terry have that other? Oh yeah, there you go. The last, I just need that one.
The little one?
This guy. Okay, thank you. We can trade. Thank you. This is great. Okay, so this, oh yeah, I'm sorry. Here's my last piece. All right, so this is also a pyrograph, and that means it's burning on paper. And so I'm throughout time, I've been a big driver. I grew up in Springfield. My mother is still alive in Springfield. I drive back and forth all the time. When I went to the Salina Arts Center, I was going back and forth across the Flint Hills. When I have a friend who lives in Wyoming, I go back and forth to Wyoming, go through Nebraska. And I really love kind of like the zen of the road. Like, it's really beautiful. And there are so many, I just love how quiet and open it is. It's really beautiful. So this piece is sort of an homage to the hay bales. There's so many different kind of hay bales. And it looks like I used this burning tool to make this. And it looks like I start and stop and start and stop, but that's not how it works. The way it works is, this is such a high-tech tool. And I kind of do this, you know, I have my either on an easel or on a diagonal. And I kind of drag my arm across. And as I drag my arm across, the tool itself kind of like is like a slub, like it gets caught, you know, in the paper, and it'll kind of stop. And then you just keep trying to do it. And so it makes this kind of erratic mark as you go across. So I realized that really the drawing itself is really a record of the process of the making. Because it's really manifests the way that it's made, and that's what results in the mark, which is burned into the paper. And then one last comment. I had a great friend the other day who said, because I had never thought this, that as shadow is a big part of the thornworks, and the shadow is the absence, you know, it's an absence thing, and that there was a relationship between that and the burning, which is also a kind of absence of the paper, which I hadn't fully, I'd never thought about, and I'm not sure I totally understand, but maybe you do. Okay. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Oh, the thorns at the beginning. Yeah. Well, at the very beginning, the show, the other one, the original, the Untangling, the entryway, there was a big tangle of thorns. And so I've got that catalog. We can look at it in the other room. But anyway, so this is a reprise of that called Still Tangled. The black one's right when you come in the door. Yeah.
Did you have a vision in your mind of what that was going to look like, or did you just do it intuitively?
You know, I just did it intuitively. I started in the center, and I just kind of I just was really interested in the mark as it comes on the paper. And the thing is, everything sits somewhere in the back of your mind. And so those hay bales and those trips across the landscape are sitting back here somewhere. And I'm sure that I was noticing as I was working on this, that's kind of part of what's coming through, maybe. But I did not plan it's going to be, this size or this way or whatever. Yeah.
Pass this around.
Sure.
If you guys have questions, that would be great. Thank you.
So I have a whole bunch of questions.
Sure.
So my first comment is that I love that you're thinking politically and really, kind of tackling that as an artist, because I think that that's kind of one of our roles as an artist.
Thank you. Yeah.
One of my questions, have these been reused in each of those flags?
They're the same elements that have been used over and over again. Now, if someone would purchase this, if a museum would take it, I would make new ones. But as it is, they're part of the same ones each time. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And then what kind of paint do you use on them?
It's acrylic, and I do it two different ways. And just like I'm kind of a haphazard gardener, I'm kind of a haphazard person in this regard too. I started out painting all of them by hand with a brush, and then I've done some of them with spray paint. But it kind of changes. Like I couldn't find the blue that was the right blue that I wanted, so those are all by hand. Then the red, I could find a spray paint, but I'd already done a lot of the acrylic. And then, and then the white, I've done spray paint and by hand. And what's odd, where's Hannah? We were talking about, oh, there you are. Yeah, so we were looking at this, and the white, it looks really bright on the top, and then kind of a different color white on the bottom. And I kept thinking, what is wrong with this? I need to move these thorns around. But it's the light above it, because some of them are sprayed and some of them are painted, but it has to do with the way the white light above reflects on the white more than the other colors. Anyway, that may be more than you want to know.
Oh, no, it's great.
Okay.
And what did you use to score? Because that's a board, right?
Yeah, it's like a 3 or 4 ply foam core. Or no, not foam core, mat board. Okay. It's like a heavy mat board mounted on dye bond. And I use this tool. So it's like burning through paper. So I would just make the same. It's like I have a limited tool chest here, everything.
And this is just a wood burning tool?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what is dye bond? I don't know.
It's kind of a lightweight aluminum, so that you can you can have these mounted so that it's a heavy mat board mounted to this sort of aluminum, which gives it stability. But it's not heavy, right? Keeps it from wobbling around.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So the tool makes the white mark. The tool makes the white mark.
No, if you look closely at those 3, you'll see, and also the small black ones over here, there are also some there that are scored. And you'll see that there's like a line, like it looks like there's a line cut into it, but it's burned into it with this tool. So because that's a paper, that's a very thick kind of paper. You want to go see? Okay. Hey, how are you? Yeah. See, yes.
The white marks. That's what I did.
Oh, that's graphite.
You just did the graphite on top of the scoring.
Yeah, so there's the graphite, then there's let's see, the black acrylic ink, and then there's sumi ink, and then there's graphite and scoring. So there's different layers. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? Yeah, Tracy. Sure.
First, I just wanted to comment how beautifully your work attempts to connect humanity back to Mother Nature.
Oh, thank you.
And I was just curious, have you always had this strong connection to nature, or did you have this aha moment in your life that connected you with nature on that profound level?
You know, I think it's sort of over time. Like when I was younger, many times younger, you know, there was just a lot of stuff you're kind of focused on. And somehow, I went back to the Art Institute as an older student. And I think that was a time that I really began paying attention to things that were, I mean, I'm sure I always appreciated and enjoyed the natural environment, but it's not as if when I was a child, I was spent hours by the river or something. And, you know, that was not my life. Yeah, I think it was probably, I don't want to say as life got less complicated because it's still complicated, but my focus maybe became quieter, maybe, or made time to be quiet, maybe, and then I think maybe it's come to the fore. Thank you. Yeah, Sid.
On the heels of the discussion that we just had, I'm just kind of overwhelmed by the spiritual level of all of these pieces, especially in this room. And I just wondered if you could talk to that, if I'm off the mark, or, but it's incredibly, especially your piece-based, you know, as you said, maybe loosely on prayer flags.
Yeah. Well, I've got this.
Oh, you've got
Can you hear me? Is everybody hearing me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. And Hannah, could you hold this? Thank you. Yeah. Well, you know, Sid, that's a really lovely question. And gosh, okay, here's what I think I would say. I think I have come to find, the way I believe, is that there is a kind of deep spirituality in life. And the way I understand it, I experience it really probably daily, you know, in taking walks and looking at trees. I just read the most beautiful book in my time of dying. And it was mentioned in the book about a woman who had had a near-death experience, and she, you know, had returned. And she talked about when she was away, she felt like she was a part of everything. She felt she was a part of the trees, and she could feel the wind in her leaves. And I feel like when I take a walk and I look at the sky, and I just feel like the spirituality kind of is everywhere. And I don't intentionally, you know, that's not something I try, but I don't even try to marvel at things. I marvel at things, you know. Maybe that's it. And people and friends and love, it's all a big deal. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Where do you find the honey locust trees?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, since I'm the only one that likes them and everyone hates them, I do have people. One time I was on an elevator and I was carrying this big thing, and this woman said, "Oh my gosh, my mother has a farm up by Smithville or something, and she's got those all over her property and she just hates them." And I said, "Great." And so I wound up going up there and harvesting, you know, them up there. And then also, so there are people and friends, like my friend Marilyn, who's not here right now, has an apartment complex, and in the back of her apartment complex, there are these trees. But I also contacted the Parks Department and asked them if it was okay if I could go to some places of theirs. And there are Shoal Creek maybe is the name of the park up north. And they have a golf course, and then they have this one area, and there are tons of honey locust trees back there. So I just go in there and get them. And then also there's another park that's maybe by Bannister Road and out by Raytown in that corner. And they have honey locust, and they have a children's playground that's not far from these trees. And so I consider it doing a great service to the children and their parents and the park as I get those. So they're definitely around. And the thing that's so interesting is they're certainly in this area, but also I was in New York City and driving down, or in a taxi or something, going down Riverside Drive, and I looked over at Riverside Park, which is over here, and I saw this honey locust tree that had all these thorns coming out of the side. So they're around. They're not as uncommon as, they're not uncommon at all.
And has this always been your work, or what was the catalyst for the honey locust trees?
Well, I've been doing them a long time, and part of it, let me think. So I really liked the kind of, my background is in sculpture, and I really like the kind of passive way of joinery, like not invasive or heavy. I like it quiet and kind of passive. And so I was using a burning tool to connect like pieces of wood or pieces of branches and things like that. And then I had access to this property that had these trees, and they were on the side, and I thought, oh, they're kind of like the burning tool. They've got that same point. And so then I started working with them, and really the first piece that I ever did, which was a while ago, was there was an exhibition at Rockhurst, and it was called Contemporary Christ and Modern Madonnas. And so it was various contemporary interpretations of religious and spiritual kind of art. So I made a piece using those tiny little thorns, and I made like a church, just a house form with a steeple, and it was called Sanctuary. And so to me, the idea was that the sanctuary was nature, and that this natural material was what that was about. And I've been doing that a while. So I'm interested in the burning as a drawing tool and the burning as a joinery kind of tool. So.
What kind of glue do you use?
Well, I use wood glue, but I use it as insurance, and I don't know that it really does anything, because it's more the tension, the way the pieces go together. And the thing that's really odd, they kind of bounce. Like, of course, over time I've dropped these, right? And so I've got these sections and I kind of drop them. But many times they don't come apart. Because they're organic and kind of natural, they just kind of flop around. They do come apart sometimes. But anyway, yeah.
So did they break like those when you take them apart?
I don't take them apart.
Well, like you said, didn't the flag, like when you took
I take the sections apart.
Oh, I see.
So I don't take, like if I have a section of thorns, I don't disconnect that section. I just take this section out of this section away from this section, kind of like that.
Do you ever stick your hands or?
Well, not really very much, but there is a very odd thing that's happening here. I noticed the other day. Because I've worked with them so long, I know them so well that it's not too damaging. But what has been damaging over time is when I would use that little burning tool and I'd push really hard into the thorn and I would get it stuck in my hand, and it hurts, And so I've had that happen. But what's really odd is several years ago, 8 years ago, who knows how long, I had a little piece of that in my finger, and it was kind of gray. So I know that it must not have been ash, because ash would have dissipated over time. So I kind of think it might have been like a little piece of the metal of that point. And it was bothersome, but I didn't try to get it out, or if I tried, I couldn't get it out. I just left it. Well, I have a little black dot that's coming to the surface now. And it's this little piece that was in there like 8 years ago. And I've noticed it's surfacing. So anyway, but it's not too big of a problem. So, and you're welcome to look at photos, and yes. And there's another question back there, Casey.
Oh, yes, right here. Yes, who had the question? There you go.
Thank you.
Yes.
I was wondering, what do you use prior to working with the branches or the thorns? What do you use to preserve them?
Oh, you know what? Nothing. I don't use anything to preserve them. I mean, the paint, preserves them in a way, but yeah, so the paint preserves the ones that are painted. In the other room, I have samples of like a very large brown thorn and a very small brown thorn. And if they're in the kind of life cycle of the thorns is this. When they grow on the tree, they're kind of green, like new ones are sort of an olive green color. And then as they become adults, they turn this really beautiful mahogany color. And if I take the mahogany colored thorns and bring them in, they stay that way forever. Like they don't really deteriorate. If they're outside, they'll turn gray. And then I've cast them in bronze in the past, and the gray ones are the ones that are best because they burn totally out. But when you go around the other room, we can go and look and you can see. But this really beautiful dark brown mahogany has been that way forever. Like it's immortal. Maybe, probably not. Anyway.
I had a bit of a follow-up. In using natural materials like the thorns, it seems like there's maybe an interest, and also like in what you've said about spirituality, there seems like there's an interest in the idea of impermanence.
Yes.
And the finiteness of life and existence and how precious and interesting that is.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a connection between a desire to use natural fibers and that? It seems like the answer is possibly yes, but I'd like you to talk more about that.
Well, I haven't, I don't use natural fibers because they're impermanent. I use them because I like them, and I must like them because they're impermanent. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm drawn to them because I like that they're not resin or plastic or metal, something that has a permanence to it. And maybe even an artificial permanence to it that is not interesting to me. I mean, not metal, but the resin or plastic, something like that. But so I'm subconsciously I'm drawn to the fact that they are impermanent and that and I think they're astounding. I mean, so their shapes and forms are amazingly beautiful in many ways.
Yeah.
Okay.
One final question.
Oh,
if
yeah,
nobody
sure.
else does. Okay, good, thank you. Susan, my question is about Chant of the Prayer Flags.
Sure.
Considering how many thousands of tiny little burn holes are in those pieces,
Yeah.
How many hours did it take to create the whole series of prayer flags?
Well, Casey, that's a good question, but my answer is not great. But here's my answer. Honestly, I can't tell you because it's over time. Like, I have them there and I work on them, and then maybe a week will go by. I mean, I do one at a time. And so I might spend like 3 hours working on one or the one I'm working on. And then maybe 2 days later, I'll spend 3 hours or another 2 hours. So I think, it's that cliched answer, but it's kind of true. It's kind of like, there's not a set time. Like, I can't say that it took 3 weeks or 2 months or 6 months, but it is, I used to think this was a goofy answer that I didn't like, but now I kind of like it. That idea that everything in your life kind of informs everything. So it's sort of like all of that time is in there somehow. And it's not a matter of days or weeks or months, but it's kind of like all the time is in that time. And I don't know what the number is.
Wow.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you all so much. I've just enjoyed talking to you. Thank you. And I do have more photos if you're interested. I have additional flag photos, and I can get them out of the folder, or you guys can get them out of the folder. And if you want to see details of things and stuff like that. Oh, great. Okay. Well, thank you so much.